You bought the farm everyone ignored. She said it soft, standing at the fence line with April light in her hair, and for a long second the whole valley seemed to hold its breath, because a man like Elias Rourke had spent 34 years learning how not to hear a woman say a thing that mattered. He did not answer right away. He set the hammer down on the top rail and he looked at her, and the mountains behind her looked back. There is a kind of silence that costs a man everything he has learned about being alone, and this was that kind. The wind moved once through the new cottonwood leaves along the creek. Judge, the black and tan collie at her boot, did not move at all, and a story that had been building itself in quiet, unannounced acts for 8 months arrived at the only sentence that could hold it. Rewind. Elias Rourke was 34 years old in the spring of 1889, and he had come down out of the San Juan Range with a saddlebag, a rolled coat, and $1,140 sewn into the lining of his vest. He had been a hand on other men's outfits for 16 years, from Pueblo up to the Animas country, and he had learned, in that time, 3 things worth carrying. He had learned that a fence tells you more about a man than his tongue. He had learned that cattle forgive slower than women and remember longer than dogs. And he had learned that a place will teach you who you are, if you let it, and if you shut up long enough to listen. The farm sat 2 miles west of Durango, on the flat where the creek bent north before it ran to meet the river. It had a house with a caved porch, a barn with a broken spine, and 86 acres of good bottomland grown up in thistle and neglect. Old man Halloran had died in the front room the winter before, and there had been no children, and the bank had put it up cheap because nobody in 3 counties wanted a place with a sagging roof and a story about a dead man in it. Elias walked the boundary in one long April afternoon and paid the bank $600 the next morning. The clerk asked him twice if he was sure. He said he was. The clerk asked him a 3rd time. He said he was. He slept the first night on the porch, because the house smelled like a closed room, and he did not yet feel he had earned the right to open its windows. He listened to the creek run. He listened to an owl work the cottonwoods down the draw. He thought about his mother, dead 9 years now of a lung sickness in a Denver rooming house, and he thought about the last thing she had said to him, which was that a man ought to build one thing in his life that would outlast him, and that it did not much matter what. He thought about the 16 years of other men's fences behind him and the empty space in front. He did not sleep much. He did not need to. A man beginning does not need sleep the way a man ending does. He did not know, that first night, that his nearest neighbor was a woman named Cora Bell Whitaker, who was 29 years old and had been a widow for 2 years and 3 months, and who kept 120 acres and 42 head of good cattle by the sheer bull-headed refusal to let go of what her husband Silas had died still holding on to. He did not know that she had watched him ride in from the ridge above her south pasture, that she had noted the set of his shoulders and the way he sat a horse, and that she had said aloud to her dog, a black and tan collie named Judge, "Well, we'll see what he makes of it." He did not know any of that yet. He only knew that the boards of the porch were cold under his back, and that the stars over Colorado in April were the same stars he had ridden under for 16 years, and that tomorrow he would begin. He began with the fence. There was a stretch of the south line, for 100 yards where his boundary met Cora Bell's, that had gone to ruin. Old man Halloran had let it fall, and Cora Bell had propped it in the last year with whatever posts she could cut alone, and it showed. Elias walked it the morning of his 2nd day, and he saw the way she had wired the brakes, and he saw the 2 places where her cattle had pushed through in the winter and left tufts of red hide on the barbs. He said nothing. He rode into town, and he bought 40 new posts from the lumberyard, and cedar because cedar lasts, and he paid the extra for it out of the vest lining without flinching. He carried them home 3 at a time on the back of a borrowed wagon, and he began to set them the next morning at dawn. She saw him from her kitchen window on the 3rd day. She was pouring coffee, and she looked up, and she saw a man she did not know sinking cedar posts into the line her husband had built and she had failed to keep. She set the pot down. She watched him for a long minute. He was working without shirt sleeves rolled, working steady, not fast, the way a man works who intends to be there tomorrow and the day after. Judge came and sat by her leg, and she rested her hand on his head, and she said, "Quiet, well. It was the same word she had said on the ridge, and it meant a different thing now, and she was not yet ready to say what. She did not go to him that day. She had learned, in the 2 years since Silas, that a woman alone learns to wait. She waited a week. She watched the fence go up post by post, 40 posts across 400 yards, and she watched him string new wire, 3 strands, tight and even, and she watched him carry off her broken posts without being asked, stacking them in a neat pile on her side of the line for firewood. He did not glance toward her house once, that she saw in all 7 days. That more than the fence was the thing she counted. A man who works for a woman without looking at her house is a man doing the work for its own sake, and she had not known there were still men like that. On the 7th day she baked a loaf of oat bread and wrapped it in a cloth, and she walked the 1/4 mile down the wagon track to his gate. He was on the barn roof. He came down the ladder when he saw her coming, and he took off his hat, and he stood at the gate with the sun behind him and the dust of the roof still on his forearms. He was tall, 6 feet and an inch, and lean the way a working man goes lean, and his hair was dark brown and cut plain, and his eyes were the color of creek water in shadow, and he had a 2-day beard because he had not bothered to shave. He wore a faded blue work shirt and a canvas coat gone soft at the elbows, and denim trousers, and boots that had walked more miles than most men ride. He did not smile, but he did not smile either. He waited. She was 5 feet and 6 inches, and she carried herself straight the way a farm-raised woman carries herself who has learned to lift her own grain sacks. Her hair was auburn, thick, twisted up under a plain straw hat, and her eyes were gray-green, and her face was the kind of face that took a long look to see all of, because it did not announce itself. She wore a long-sleeved calico dress in a small blue print, buttoned to the throat, and a full-length dark skirt over it, and a canvas work apron, and sturdy boots under the hem. She held the bread out over the top rail. "I'm Cora Belle Whitaker," she said, "from the place next over. I brought you this because you fixed my fence and did not tell me you were going to." He took the bread. He said, "Elias Rourke. I saw the wire on the ground." She said, "Silas built that fence in '84. He was my husband. He died 2 years ago March of a heart trouble nobody saw coming. I have not been able to keep it up alone." He said, "It is a good fence now. The posts will hold 30 years. She said, "You bought the farm everyone ignored." He looked at her, and the mountains behind her looked back. He said, "I did." She said, "Well, then I expect we'll be neighbors." He said, "I expect we will." That was in April. In May the Cottonwoods came in along the creek, a soft new green that seemed to happen overnight, and Elias built a chicken run and a smokehouse and reshingled the west side of the barn. In June he ran a new roof line on the porch of the house and opened the windows for the first time and let the closed room smell go out of the front room where old man Halloran had died. He worked from 4 in the morning until the light went, and he ate what he cooked, and he slept hard, and he did not once cross onto Cora Belle's side of the boundary line without a reason. He had learned in 16 years of other men's outfits that a man's word is not the loudest thing about him. His feet are. And his feet were staying on his own side of the wire. It is a strange thing being watched. A man on his own place learns, without meaning to, the sound of a horse on the ridge above him, and the flash of a straw hat at a kitchen window a 1/4 mile off. Elias did not look toward her house, but he knew by the 4th day exactly where the sun stood when she took her coffee. He never said any of this to himself in words. A man who says a thing in words is a man beginning to move toward it. He was not ready to move yet. Cora Belle watched. She did not press. She sent Judge across the line once when Elias was mending the north gate, and Judge sat and watched him for 2 hours and came home. She rode her southeast pasture on Tuesdays, always Tuesdays, because that was the day Silas had ridden it, and on Tuesdays she could always see Elias somewhere on the flat below, working. It became a small comfort she did not name. Grief doesn't leave. It just learns to share the house with other things. Grief has a schedule of its own. It does not consult you. It comes on Tuesdays, sometimes, when a woman is riding the pasture her dead husband used to ride. It comes at the sink in the evening, when the light goes flat. It comes at the exact moment a woman notices she has gone a full hour without thinking about the thing that had lived inside her chest for 2 years. She is guilty for that hour, and she is grateful for that hour, and she does not know which of the two she is more. There is a specific kind of quiet that settles over a Colorado ranch in late June. It is composed of 100 small sounds: the tin windmill above the well, the shift of cattle in the far pasture, a jay in the cottonwoods. It is the sound a place makes when it is willing for a little while to let you belong to it. Elias sat on his newly finished porch on such an evening and listened to it, and he thought, this is what my mother meant. The trouble came in the person of Harlon Voss, and Harlon Voss was not a bad man. He owned 4,000 acres east of the river, and he ran a good outfit, and he was 41 and a widower himself, and he had been paying court to Cora Belle Whitaker in a slow and dignified way for 11 months. He came Sundays. He brought her books he did not read. He asked after her cattle in the tone of a man who was already half inventorying them. He was a tall, soft-spoken man with steady hands and gray at his temples and a habit of using the words fair and best interest, and he genuinely believed he was offering her a kindness, because he thought a woman alone at 29 was a woman in need of rescue, and he could not quite see that Cora Belle was not. He first heard about Elias in June, from the clerk at the Durango feed store, who mentioned that a man had bought the old Halloran place and paid cash and was fixing the south fence with new cedar. Harlon Voss listened without expression. He rode out that Sunday to see Cora Belle as he always did, and he sat on her porch and he said, "I hear the Halloran place has a new man." She said, "Elias Rourke. He is a good neighbor." Harlon Voss said, "I hope he does not overreach. That is a hard place to make pay. A woman alone should be careful whose fences she leans on." He said it gently. He meant it gently. He believed himself to be looking out for her best interest, because those were the two words he used to interpret every act of his own life. She said he fixed the south line without being asked. He did not lean. Harlon Voss let it go. He was a patient man. He had waited 11 months, and he would wait 11 more, because he understood that a widow of 29 is a woman who will only move once, and that the man who is standing in the right place when she moves is the man she chooses. What he did not yet understand was that the right place, in Cora Belle's own private geography, was not a parlor. It was a fence line, and he was on the wrong side of it. The town chorus, as any town has a chorus, took its own view. There was Mrs. Ada Pettigrew at the post, who had known Cora Belle since she was 15, and who said, "That Rourke boy is a working man, and I have seen the way he does not look at her when she rides by, which is a way a man only manages not to look at a woman if he is trying very hard." There was the blacksmith, Amos Kettering, who said only, "The man knows how to shoe a horse," and coming from Amos this was praise near to him. There was Reverend Doddridge, who said, in confidence to his wife over supper, "I believe the widow Whitaker is going to marry again, and I believe it will not be Harlon Voss," and his wife said, "Thank the Lord, because Harlon Voss reads books he does not read." And there was the general store girl, Etta Pryor, 17 and sharp-eyed, who said flat out to Cora Belle across the counter one morning, "Mrs. Whitaker, that man has built you a fence and a woodpile and a rain porch, and he has not said one word about any of it. And if you do not do something about him by fall, I will be very disappointed in you." Cora Belle had laughed for the first time in a public place in 2 years. A town chorus does not know it is a chorus. Each voice believes it is only speaking for itself. None of them knew they were, together, telling Cora Belle Whitaker a single sentence in 4 parts, and the sentence was, "We see him and we approve, and we are only waiting for you to see him too." This is what small towns are for. In July, Elias built the woodpile. That was the first of the 3. He came onto her property without being asked, which he had promised himself he would not do, but he came because a summer storm had knocked down 2 of her cottonwoods along the creek, and she did not have a man to buck them, and he came at first light with an axe and a 2-man saw he worked one-handed, and he cut and split and stacked 6 ricks of firewood along the north side of her barn where the wind would not get at it. He was there when she came out at 7 with her coffee. He was sweating through his shirt. He nodded to her once, and he kept working. She watched him for a minute. She went back inside, and she came out with a second cup, and she set it on the top of a fence post 10 feet from him, and she went back to her kitchen without a word. He drank it when he took his midday break. He set the empty cup on the post the same place she had left it. Neither of them said a thing about it. That evening she had 6 ricks of firewood stacked to dry, and she cried once, hard and short, at the kitchen sink, and then she washed her face and made supper. A woman who has learned to keep a farm alone has learned, first, to keep her face. In August he did the window. That was the second, and it was quieter, and it was the one that broke her open. She had mentioned once in June, to no one in particular but with Elias in earshot at the general store, that the east side of her kitchen had no window, because Silas had meant to put one in and had died before he did, and the morning light came into her kitchen through the door only, and she took her coffee there because she liked to see the sun come up over the ridge. She had said it as a small remembering. She had not thought he had heard. She had not thought anyone had. He came on a Wednesday in August, and he brought a pane of glass wrapped in burlap and lumber and tools, and he asked her, for the first time, direct. He said, "Mrs. Whitaker, I heard you say once you wanted an east-facing window in your kitchen. I would like to build it for you. It will take me one day." She stood in her doorway for a long time. She said, "Yes, Mr. Rourke. Please." He worked from 6 that morning until 4 in the afternoon. He cut the opening, he framed it, he set the sill, he glazed the pane, he trimmed it inside and out. He did not come inside for water. She brought it to him at the sill from the outside, so he would not have to track sawdust across her floor. When it was done, the east light came through the new pane and made a clean rectangle on her kitchen table where she took her coffee, and she stood in the middle of that rectangle, and she did not speak for a full minute. Then she said, "Lo, thank you." He said, "You're welcome." He said, "Silas would have done a better job of the trim." She said, "No. He would not have." He said nothing to that. He packed his tools and he went home. She sat at her kitchen table that evening with the last of the light on her hands, and she thought about him building a window so she would have good light, and she thought that is what love looks like when it does not announce itself. It just quietly faces east. She said it aloud to Judge. Judge did not disagree. Cora Belle did not tell Elias, that night after the window, what she had said aloud to Judge. She carried the sentence with her from August to November. She carried it the way a woman carries a stone she has picked up on a walk and cannot bring herself to set down. It just quietly faces east. She said it, sometimes, to no one at all. Somewhere along in there, and I want you to tell me in the comments below where you are watching from tonight, because I think this next part is the kind of moment every person listening has known once, on one side of a fence or the other. Somewhere along in there Cora Belle Whitaker began to understand that she had not been mourning her dead husband for 2 years and 3 months. She had been mourning what she thought she would never have again. And a quiet man on the next place had, without announcing it, given it back to her one nail at a time. In September the cottonwoods went gold along the creek, and the golden light lay over the flat like a blessing, and Harlon Voss came to Cora Belle's on a Sunday, and he said, "Mrs. Whitaker, I have been paying you court for a year now. I would like your answer." She said, "Mr. Voss, you have been kind and patient, and I have been unfair to you by not saying sooner. Cannot marry you. My answer is no, and it would have been no in March, and I should have told you then." Harlon Voss set his coffee cup down very carefully. He looked at her a long time. He said, "It is because of Rourke." She said, "It is because of me. Mr. Rourke has not asked me anything." Harlon Voss said, "He does not need to ask. A man who builds a woman a window is asking." He said it not bitter but as a man forced to see plain. He said, "Mrs. Whitaker, I run 4,000 acres, and I have a house with 8 rooms, and I would have been a fair husband to you." She said, "I know you would have. I know." She said it as a real thing, not a softening, and he heard the difference because Harlon Voss, for all his patience, was not a stupid man. He was quiet a long moment. He said, "He is not going to be an easy man, that one. He does not talk. You will spend the first 2 years of your marriage guessing what he thinks." She said, "I have spent the last 2 years of my life guessing what a dead man would think. Guessing what a living one thinks will be a relief." Harlon Voss almost smiled. He did not quite. He stood and he set his hat on and he said, "You know, I did think for a while I could earn this. I did not understand that the earning was not mine to do." He said it once, cleanly, and then he set his shoulders. He said, "I will be at church next Sunday, and I will speak to you kindly, and you will speak to me kindly back, and this valley will not have anything to whisper about. I ask that much." She said, "You have it." He said, "Then that is a fair trade." And he tipped his hat once, and he meant it. He rode home. He did not come back. He was married the next spring to a widow from Pagosa Springs, and he was, by all accounts, a fair husband to her, and he lived to be 72, and Cora Belle always spoke of him with warmth. The third of the 3 came on the 3rd of October, and it was the smallest, and it was the one that undid Elias himself. He was mending the gate between their 2 properties, the one at the top of the wagon track, and Cora Belle came out to see him, and she brought coffee, and she brought a small object wrapped in a blue handkerchief. She waited until he had finished the gate. He set the hammer down on the top rail. She held out the handkerchief. He opened it. Inside was a small brass compass, plain, working, the glass scratched. She said this was Silas's. He carried it every day for 11 years. I have kept it in a drawer for 2, and it deserves to be carried by a man who works outside. I would like you to have it. Elias Rourke, who had not cried since he was 9 years old at his mother's bedside, stood at the top of the wagon track between 2 farms in October of 1889 with a dead man's compass in his hand, and his eyes went wet once, and he did not look away. He said, "Mrs. Whitaker." She said, "Cora Belle." He said, "Cora Belle. I will carry it every day." She said, "I know you will." They stood at the fence line then, the boundary between his 86 acres and her 120, the place where 2 futures met, and she said it again. She said, "You bought the farm everyone ignored." He said, "I did." She said, "Why?" He said, "Because a man ought to build one thing in his life that will outlast him, and my mother told me it does not much matter what, and I thought this place might." He was quiet a moment. He said, "And because I was tired of working other men's fences." She said, "Well, then work mine." He said, "Cora Belle, I have not asked you." She said, "I know." He asked. She said, "Yes." The October wind moved the last of the gold cottonwood leaves down the creek, and Judge came up the wagon track and sat between their boots as if he had been waiting 11 months for the meeting to conclude, and the mountains behind them looked back the way they had in April, and the whole valley seemed to hold its breath, and then it exhaled. That is what love looks like when it doesn't announce itself. It just quietly faces east. They were married in Cora Belle's front room on the 15th of November, by Reverend Doddridge, with Mrs. Ada Pettigrew and Amos Kettering and Etta Pryor and 11 other neighbors present, and with the first hard snow of the year coming down soft outside the new east-facing window. Etta Pryor stood in the back and folded her arms and said to herself, "Well, it took you long enough," and she was pleased with herself for a full week. Harlon Voss sent a wedding gift, which was a good milled saw, and a card that said, "For the fences." He signed it, "With respect, H. Voss." Cora Belle wept once when she read it, and she showed it to Elias, and Elias put the saw in the barn and hung the card on a nail in the tack room where he would see it every day, and he kept it there for the next 41 years. They joined the 2 farms, 206 acres of good bottomland, 98 head of cattle by the following spring, a house with an east window, a barn with a new roof, a woodpile that never ran low. Elias carried the brass compass every day of his life. He looked at it sometimes at the top of the south pasture when the light was going and he could not quite remember where a decade had gone. He never spoke of it much. He did not need to. Some things, once accepted, don't need speaking of again. They had 2 sons and a daughter. The daughter was named Ada, for Mrs. Pettigrew. The oldest boy was named for Elias's mother's father, a Welshman named Owen. The youngest was named Silas. Cora Belle had asked, and Elias had said, "Yes, of course. Of course." A man who understands that a woman's first love is not a rival to her second is a man who has stopped keeping score, and Elias had stopped keeping score the day he set the first cedar post in the south fence. Now here is the thing, and I want you to hear this, because the story is old, and the valley is old, and the 2 of them are long gone, and the farm still stands, and their granddaughter runs it. But the thing about love that arrives quietly, love that does not announce itself, is that most people are looking the wrong way when it walks up. Most people are watching for the man with the 8-room house and the books he does not read, because that is the kind of love the world tells you to expect. Most people miss the man on the fence line with the cedar posts and the new pane of glass, because he is not saying anything, and the world has trained you to listen for words. If someone in your life is building you a window and you did not ask them to, and they are not telling you they are, and the light comes in different in the morning because of what they have done, then I would ask you to look up from your coffee for one moment and see them. See them plain. Because a man like Elias Rourke will not tell you what he is. He will only quietly face east. And if you are the one setting the cedar posts, and you have been wondering whether the woman on the next place has noticed, I will tell you now that she has. She has counted every post. She has counted the days between them. She is only waiting to see if you will keep coming back tomorrow. That is all she is waiting for. She is not waiting for a speech. You bought the farm everyone ignored. That was what she said. That was where it began. And that is where I will leave you, at a fence line in April of 1889, with a hammer set on the top rail and the mountains looking back. I want you to picture the two of them in the winter of that first year of their marriage. Picture Elias Rourke coming in from the south pasture at dusk with snow on the brim of his hat. Picture Cora Belle at the pine table under the east window, a lamp lit against the early dark, a pot of stew on the stove, Judge asleep by the door. That is what a life looks like when it does not announce itself. That is what most lives look like. Nobody writes them down. I am writing this one down because it happened. Thank you for spending this hour with me. I am grateful for every one of you, and I do not take a single view for granted. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments below whether you have ever known an Elias Rourke, or been one, or waited on one to walk up your wagon track with a saw and a pane of glass. I read them. I read every one. And if you are new to this porch, welcome. Pull up a chair. There is coffee and there is a good fire, and I will be here again next time. Next time on this channel, I have a story for you about a rancher's daughter in the winter of 1891, and a stranger who came off the last stage from Santa Fe carrying nothing but a violin and a letter with her father's name on it, and what he said to her on the fourth night when the snow closed the pass and the lamps went low. That one is called, He Came Off the Last Stage with a Violin and a Letter, and what he said on the fourth night changed everything. I hope you will ride with me for that one. Until next time, keep riding.